heard heavy footsteps out of the door and someone barged in. She looked up with a slight frown. Two of Taehyung's men entered, supporting a visibly injured Taehyung between them. His shirt was soaked with blood and his face contoured with pain. Yet there was a flicker of something else in his eyes as he met 𝐻𝐻𝐻𝑚's gaze. "Doctor, we need your help. Boss is hurt," one of the men said. 𝐻𝐻 stood up, her expressions unreadable as she motioned them to lie Taehyung on the bed. "Leave us," she said coldly. Taehyung nodded at his men and they walked out. 𝐻𝐻 moved to Taehyung's side, her fingers deftly unbuttoning his shirt to reveal the deep gash on his abdomen. She could feel his eyes on her, watching her every move. "This isn't the first time you have shown up here like this. You should be more careful," she said in a low tone and began cleaning the wound. Taehyung smirked, though it quickly turned. "I trust you'll take care of me, doctor. Besides, it's just my third time here," he mumbled, his voice laced with a mix of amusement and something darker. 𝐻𝐻 didn't respond, but her hands worked with precision, stitching up his wound. She could feel the tension between them, the air thick with unspoken words and unfulfilled desire. She was aware of every breath he took, every slight movement of his body under her touch. She finished and looked up, meeting his gaze. "You should rest. This will heal in time, but you need to take it easy," she spoke softly and turned away. Taehyung's hand reached out and captured her wrist. His grip was firm but not painful. 𝐻𝐻 could feel the heat of his skin against hers. "You worry too much, doctor. I'm tougher than I look." His voice was a low rumble. 𝐻𝐻 narrowed her eyes slightly. "You are reckless and you seem to enjoy putting yourself in danger." She pulled her wrist free but didn't step back. He smirked, but there was a flicker of something more vulnerable in his eyes. "Maybe I just like the attention," he admitted. She stared at him in disbelief. "You would hurt yourself for attention," she said furiously and shook her head. Then stared at her intensely, watching her like a prey. 𝐻𝐻 peeked her head out of the door. "You can take your boss." She let his men in. They helped Taehyung to walk while she prescribed some painkillers and handed them to them. As soon as they were gone, 𝐻𝐻 swiftly walked to the window and waited until they sat in the car. She packed up her bag and hurriedly walked out. She slipped into her car and followed Taehyung's car from a safe distance. Her heart pounded with a mixture of excitement and something darker. She couldn't hold back from following him. After about 20 minutes, Taehyung's car pulled into the driveway of his mansion. 𝐻𝐻 parked a few houses down, far enough to avoid his suspicions but close enough to keep an eye on him. She watched as he got out. His movements were slow. She sat in the car, her eyes fixed on his mansion. The minutes ticked by, turning into an hour. She leaned back on her seat and closed her eyes until her phone jarred in the silence of the car. She glanced at her phone and saw it was one of his men's number. "Dr. 𝐻𝐻, sorry to disturb you at this hour, but boss is running fever. Can you please come over? I can come to pick you up." 𝐻𝐻 glanced at her wristwatch. It was past 2 a.m. I'm nearby, so I'll come over in a few minutes." She scratched her eyebrow. He went silent for a while. "All right." She declined the call and ran her fingers in her hair. After some minutes, 𝐻𝐻 drove to his mansion and pulled into the driveway. The guard led her in. 𝐻𝐻 was familiar with this place, so she told the guard to go away. She entered his bedroom and found the guy who called her pacing back and forth. "Here you are." 𝐻𝐻 fixed her gaze on Taehyung as he laid on the bed, his skin pale and drenched in sweat. His eyes were half closed, a feverish glaze over them. 𝐻𝐻 approached him, her expression a mask of professional concern, though inside her emotions were in a turbulent storm. "I prescribed some medicines. Did he take them?" she asked his man. He shook his head in denial while Taehyung weakly gestured for him to walk out. "You really don't know how to take care of yourself," she muttered, placing her cold hand on his forehead. He looked at her. "We're here to take care of me, doctor." His voice was weak and hoarse. 𝐊𝐴N's heart fluttered in her chest. She administered medications. Her movements were precise and efficient, but she couldn't help but feel the heat of his burning gaze on her. "You're a terrible patient. I suppose I'm stuck with you," he chuckled darkly. "I wouldn't want anyone else." She looked away and cleared her throat. "Anyways, how did you come just in a few minutes?" he asked with a frown. "Yeah, I had a meeting with someone nearby." She scratched her neck. Taehyung's gaze darkened. "With whom? What?" He pursed his lips. "Nothing. I just feel drowsy," he said coldly and closed his eyes. "You should stay here tonight. I wouldn't like it if you went at this hour. The room is prepared for you." His tone left no room for argument. Time skip. These days 𝐊𝐴N isn't stalking Taehyung, and she doesn't want him to get suspicious. He usually comes to her office for a checkup. Today Mr. Kim and 𝐊𝐴N's father had thrown a lavish party. 𝐊𝐴N made sure to look as beautiful as she could. When she arrived at the party, her eyes scanning the crowd for a familiar figure. She knew Taehyung would be here. Her father had mentioned him with a slight smile. Her heart pounded as she looked for him when she heard her father's voice. "𝐊𝐴N, you're here?" He embraced her in a warm hug. 𝐊𝐴N smiled. "Yes, Dad." He pulled out while 𝐊𝐴N hugged her mom. "You look so beautiful." She kissed her cheeks. 𝐊𝐴N giggled. "Where are Zayn and Jessica?" She asked about her siblings. "They are with their friends, enjoying." She nodded. "I told you not to attend to any patients today. See, you are late." "I can't leave my patients, Dad, and you know that. Besides, the party haven't even started yet." "All right, enjoy yourself. I have to attend some guests, and yeah, I have something important to announce today. Stay here." She nodded and her parents walked away. 𝐊𝐴N let out a sigh of relief as she spotted Taehyung in a corner who was burning holes in her soul. She made her way to him. "Hello, Mr. Kim," she said with a warm smile which Taehyung returned. For a while, he felt as if she is an angel standing in front of him in a white dress. "Hi, doctor. It's Taehyung for you." She nodded with a smile. "It's 𝐊𝐴N. We are not in a hospital." His lips tugged into a smirk. "How's your wound healing?" "It's healing. Thanks for your expert care," he said in a low voice that sent shivers down her spine. "Would you please check? It itches," he said, his eyes never leaving hers. "Sure." She reached out, gently moved his suit to the side. Her fingers brushed against his skin. She felt his muscles tense under her touch. A barely perceptible reaction that made her pulse quicken. "Have you been scratching it?" She looked up at him. He nodded, clenching his fist. The soft fingers burned his skin. "The wound still needs time. You shouldn't work for a few days." She moved back and said in a serious tone, "I can't afford to rest. You know that." He replied, his gaze piercing into hers. "Just be careful. You wouldn't want to end up in my care again, would you?" Before Taehyung could respond, his secretary's voice interrupted them. "Mr. Kim, Mr. Kang is here to meet you. Your father is calling you over. Please come," she said with a smile, trailing her fingers over his arm and holding it. 𝐊𝐴N stared at her hand with a burning gaze. Taehyung looked at her with disdain and parted his lips to speak, but 𝐊𝐴N's voice caught his attention. "I should be going," she said, and tried hard to keep her voice calm and steady despite the turmoil within her. She walked away, not wanting anyone to see the storm raging inside her. Taehyung pushed away the secretary's hand. "How many times do I have to remind you not to touch me? You disgust me," he said in a low growl, glaring at her. Her face went pale. "I'm sorry," she murmured. "Now get lost." She quickly went away while Taehyung fixed his gaze on 𝐊𝐴N's back as she was talking to a handsome guy. He had a playful smile on his lips. Taehyung clenched his jaw and took a deep breath. "Whoever you are, I will deal with you later," he said, and walked to Mr. Kang. As soon as 𝐊𝐴N walked a few steps, a familiar figure stopped her. "Hey, beautiful." He stared at her with a smirk. 𝐊𝐴N passed him a glare. "Hi, now get out of my way," she said through gritted teeth. Chris dramatically placed his hand on his chest. "You're the only person who makes me feel helpless," she chuckled, shaking her head. You are someone who makes others helpless, as if I don't know about your cruelty. She muttered, clenching her jaw, his chuckle staring at her. I know I'm not a good person, but my love for you is pure, trust me. Why shook her head and walked away. She couldn't shrug the scene off her mind when Taehyung's secretary touched him. She felt like killing her on the spot. She took a deep breath and calmed herself. An idea popped into her mind, seeing his secretary near the swimming pool. Wine called out a waiter and whispered something into his ear, handing him something secretly. The waiter nodded with a smile and glanced at Taehyung's secretary, who had now walked away. The waiter went behind her while Zen and Jessica approached her. They got immersed in a conversation until Zen's friend dragged them away. Wine stood in a corner when she looked around for Taehyung's secretary and the waiter, but no one was there. Are you looking for someone? Wine flinched, hearing his deep voice near her. Her heartbeat went wild, feeling his hot breath on her neck. Taehyung subtly inhaled her scent, and it was driving him crazy. Unknown to them, both of them were going crazy for each other. Wine composed herself and moved away, but mistakenly bumped into a waiter who had a tray of water in his hand. Wine gasped as her dress was drenched, sticking to her body. The waiter was continuously apologizing. She sent him away while Taehyung's eyes were stuck on her body. He gulped and looked away when his gaze landed on Grace, who was staring at her. Taehyung clenched his fist when they heard a splash in the swimming pool with a familiar feminine scream. Taehyung glanced at his secretary drowning and took off his coat. Wine's eyes glimmered seeing her in the swimming pool when she saw Taehyung coming with his coat. Her heart sank, thinking otherwise, but he wrapped it around her. Everyone's watching you, he muttered coldly and walked away. Someone from the waiter saved his secretary. Everyone got back to their business while Wine had her eyes on Taehyung secretly. Soon Mr. Kim and Mr. Lee were on the stage and announced Taehyung and Wine's marriage in 2 weeks, which they had fixed long ago. Wine stared at them in disbelief, so did Taehyung. Their eyes met for a moment, but none of them could name the emotion in each other's eyes. Mr. Lee came to congratulate Wine while she saw Taehyung striding out. She was still in utter shock. Time skip. Wine was still in a daze. Everything happened unexpectedly. When Chris learned about her wedding, he barged into her office and threatened her, but she couldn't care less about him. The next day, she got the news of his death from an anonymous person who usually sends her gifts and flowers. At first, she thought it was Chris, but after his death, she realized he was someone else who stalked her. After the party, Wine didn't see Taehyung. She didn't know how he would react after learning about their marriage. Throughout the ceremony, Taehyung couldn't take his eyes off Wine. Both of them were stunned as their desire changed into reality unexpectedly. Now Wine was in Taehyung's bedroom, her heart racing from the intensity of their wedding kiss. The lingering sensation of his lips on hers sent shivers down her spine. The passion, the hunger they had both wanted more but held back. She shook her head, took a deep breath and glanced around. Her eyes wandered around the room and she made her way to a slightly ajar door as curiosity got the better of her. As she entered, the sight greeted her, made her gasp. Inside, neatly arranged on shelves and hangers were her pictures, photos of her at different times and candid shots, stolen moments. There were even accessories, a tissue paper with her lipstick mark. She had no idea Taehyung had been this obsessed with her. Wine came back to the bedroom and closed the door. She took a water bottle from the fridge and gulped it in one go. The water spilled over the sides of her mouth, trickling down to her neck when Wine heard the door open and close. Wine, he came close to her. She turned around, keeping away the water bottle. Taehyung's eyes traveled down to the water drops on her neck. He closed the distance between them, grabbed her jaw and pulled her face close to his. Welcome to my world. She wrapped her arms around his neck with a smirk. Glad to be here, she murmured, staring deep into his eyes. Are you happy with this marriage? He squeezed her cheeks, forming her lips into a pout and kissed them. He was about to pull away, but Wine tangled her fingers in his hair and kissed him passionately. Both of them savored their lips with the same passion and hunger. Then pinned her against the wall, tilting her head. "Answer my question first," she whispered between the kiss. They pulled out, breathing heavily. "Happy isn't the right word. I have wanted you for so long. It's been an obsession, a craving I couldn't control. Every time I saw you, every time I thought of you, it consumed me," he said huskily, staring at her features as if quenching his thirst. Wayne's heart pounded against her chest. She placed her hand on Taeyung's chest. His heart was no different than hers. "And now, what do you feel now?" Taeyung's thumb traced the line of her jaw, his eyes never leaving hers. "Now that you are mine, I feel complete. But I also feel this insatiable need. I want more of you, Wayne. I want all of you." His words sent shivers down her spine, and she could see the same hunger, the same desire reflected in his eyes. "Those pictures of mine in your wardrobe, I saw them." Taeyung chuckled, peppering soft kisses on her cheek and jaw. "I know, I wanted you to see it." He bit her cheek and looked at her. "So you were the one who used to send me gifts, flowers and notes." He hummed in response. "I didn't know you felt the same." He passed her a questioning gaze. She chuckled, holding his jaw. "My room is in the same state as your wardrobe." Taeyung took a deep breath and crashed his lips on hers. Wayne responded with equal fervor. The kiss was a heady mix of desperation. He lifted her in his arms without breaking the kiss and carried her to the bed. He laid her on the bed, straddling, and broke the kiss. "Look up there," he said, breathing heavily, and pointed at the roof. Wayne's eyes widened, seeing her smiling large picture right above the bed. "What is this?" He chuckled, caressing her cheek. "I watch you to put myself to sleep," he murmured, kissing her each feature. Wayne switched the position and hovered over him. She kissed him hungrily, as if she wanted to consume him completely. Taeyung's hands found the zipper, while Wayne unbuttoned his shirt in a haste to feel his skin against her. Their movements were a dance of passion and urgency, each touch igniting a fire that burned hotter with every passing second. Few days later, days had passed since their wedding. The lingering touches, stolen glances, and unspoken words between them were a testament to their growing connection. Today, Wayne went to the hospital for the first time after their marriage. An emergency had come up, and despite Taeyung's stern warning against it, she couldn't ignore her duty. Since Wayne arrived, she has thrown herself into her work, attending to critical cases. Hours passed in a blur, and as the situation stabilized, she finally had a moment to breathe. She pulled out her phone and texted Taeyung, letting him know she would be leaving soon. Just as she was about to head out, a group of men stormed into her office. "Don't try anything. If you run or scream, you'll hurt the staff and patients," he hissed, brandishing a knife. One of his men placed a knife on Wayne's neck. "Why are you doing this?" she asked calmly, recognizing Mr. Collins as Chris' father. He chuckled. "Why not ask your husband about it?" He paused, stepping close to her, and brought the knife to her face. "Anyways, as he's not here, let me tell you this. He killed my son Chris just because of you," he said furiously, and slapped her across the face, taking her off guard. "Bloody jerk, fight a man if you are a man," she yelled at him and gave him a headbutt. Mr. Collins hissed, stumbling backward. He gestured for his men to move away from her and strode to stab her, but the door opened, revealing him followed by his guards. "Leave her," he hissed while his eyes darkened, seeing the finger mark on her face. "You think you can just walk in here and give orders? You took my son, and now I'll take your wife." In the blink of an eye, he slit Wayne's arm. "Collins, I'll give you the worst," he growled, rushing to him and began hitting him constantly while his guards were fighting with Collins' men. Wayne sat in a corner, faintly groaning in pain. Taeyung knocked Collins and rushed to Wayne. "Wayne, are you okay?" He patted her cheeks gently. She nodded weakly. Taeyung lifted her in his arms and ordered his guards to bring Collins to his basement. landscape. Boyan woke up in their bedroom. Taehyung was beside her, holding her hand tightly. He looked up as she stood, relief soothing his features. "You're awake?" he mumbled, brushing the hair from her face. She managed a weak smile. Taehyung let out a sigh. "I had told you not to go to the hospital, so why did you have to be so stubborn?" he said in a low tone, but the rage in his voice didn't go unnoticed by her. "That's my duty, Taehyung. I couldn't just leave my patients," she said weakly. Taehyung released her hand and stood. "Do you still want to get angry at me? Don't you see my state now?" Her voice broke as she sat. Taehyung turned to her, helped her sit, and sat beside her. "No, I just can't see you hurt." He closed his eyes for a moment and then opened it. They were softer and filled with concern. "You have no idea how I felt when I saw your bleeding arm. I can't lose you, Wine." He cupped her face and kissed her forehead softly. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to scare you." She placed her palm on his cheek and caressed it with her thumb. "Next time you'll be more careful." He held her hand and kissed her palm. She smiled and nodded. "Did you kill Chris?" He nodded, burying his face in the crook of her neck, making sure not to hurt her warm. "Why?" "He came to your office and threatened you not to marry me. I had enough of him. You have no idea how badly I wanted to kill him every time I saw him in your office or near you." She chuckled, trailing her fingers in his hair. "Just like I felt seeing that secretary of yours." She could feel him smiling over her neck. "But I threw her out the next day of the party. I know, or else I would have killed her." He shook his head and pulled out. "I love you, Wine. I love you so much. Words can't describe it. It's like an obsession. I can't get enough of you. I want you with me every time." Wine crashed her lips on his, cutting him off. Then grabbed her hair and pulled her even closer, deepening the kiss